sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights are a precondition for women empowerment and essential to dignity and development. Population, sexual reproductive health and rights, and gender equality are inextricably linked. Beijing and Cairo go hand in hand, mutually reinforcing and universal. Today, we gather not only to commemorate, but also to thank the member states for their efforts. While significant progress has been made, it is fragile. Too many women still die giving birth. Too many women and girls are denied safety and opportunity. Millions of youth and marginalized people do not have their most basic needs met. And new threats are rising: climate change, increasing conflict, digital world where technology, including artificial intelligence, can be fabulous opportunities when used properly, instead of being weaponized against women and girls. Demographic shifts are reshaping societies. Rapid population growth in some regions, aging in others, rising migration, systems are strained, inequalities deepen, reproductive rights come under threat. Excellences, je m'adresse à vous.
Excellencies, I address you today as the new Executive Director of UNFPA. I take on this responsibility with humility and determination. I am determined to protect what has been achieved and to stand up for human rights and to go further together so that the promises made in Beijing and Cairo are finally upheld. The United Nations Population Fund is at your side, alongside the partners in the United Nations, civil society, and particularly women's organizations and networks as they continue their tireless work to promote the rights and choices of women and girls in all their diversity. UNFPA's contribution to these efforts is unique. As a public health and population agency, we work to ensure that every woman and girl can live free from violence and decide freely on her future. Sexual and reproductive health and rights are the foundation of equality in our society, the best investment in the better, fairer world envisioned in the 2030 Agenda.
Beijing and Cairo with urgent action. Under our Secretary General leadership, we look forward to delivering as one with our sister agency on the ground. Let us recommit to do better together and make sure that no woman should die while giving life. Let's invest in rights and choices, the foundation of justice, prosperity, and peace. Merci.
Merci. I thank the Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund. I now invite Ms. Hala Haidar, Chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, to make her statement.
Madam President of the GA, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 30 years after Beijing, it must be said loud and clear, gender equality is not a favor. It's not optional. It is justice, peace, and progress for all humanity. Beijing gave us a powerful blueprint. It mandated the world to tackle 12 urgent areas: poverty, education, violence, decision-making, among others, and it transformed global policies. We have made gains: stronger laws against gender-based violence, more girls in schools, and a growing recognition that women's rights are human rights. But let us be honest, we are at a crossroad. Around the world, we witness a backlash against women's human rights, their underrepresentation in decision-making, online abuse, and discrimination against women being coded into new technologies. Moreover, we are horrified by the impact of conflict on women and girls. This is why CEDAW the committee and the convention matters more than ever. Beijing gave us the vision. CEDAW gives us the compass. The convention is legally binding. It holds states to account and measures progress and turns promises into rights that cannot be taken away. CEDAW covers every Beijing priority, defends women's economic rights, access to resources, calls for education, a force of transformation, places gender-based violence against women at the center of its concern and demands action. It advances women's voice in peace and security processes, and in that regard, CEDAW has just published an addendum on WPS. And with General Recommendation number 40 on the equal and inclusive representation of women in decision-making system, whose elaboration was supported by a large number of member states, it sets a bold roadmap for 50-50 parity in decision-making, not some distant day, but now. CEDAW is not a bystander. It's a driving force. It is addressing many emerging issues faced by women and girls in conflict, online abuse, stereotypes, and the gendered impacts of climate change. So today, let us stand together and say we will not go back. We will not allow the progress of the past 30 years to be undone. We will renew our commitments, demand accountability, and keep pushing until every woman and girl can live in freedom, equality, and dignity. Beijing gave us the blueprint. CEDAW gives us the compass. Today, as we celebrate Beijing Plus 30, I call on every government, in every institution, and every one of us. Let us turn today's momentum into a movement. Let us act united, boldly, urgently, until equality is no longer a dream, but the lived reality of every woman and girls everywhere. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. I now invite Ms. Claudia Flores, chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, to make a statement.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and colleagues, it is an honor to join you in my capacity as chair of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. Thank you for including the working group in this landmark discussion. As we reflect on and reaffirm the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we have both an opportunity but also a responsibility. We celebrate the gains of the last 30 years, recognizing that these victories, above all, belong to the brave women and girls human rights defenders who have pressed forward in the face of great restraints and risk. We also acknowledge the important progress achieved by member states in partnership with diverse stakeholders. As it marks its 15th anniversary, the working group has seen meaningful strides, from laws ensuring equal participation in public life, to reforms dismantling discrimination in family and cultural life, to new investments expanding women's and girls' economic rights. These advances demonstrate what is possible when states commit systematically to equality in all of its dimensions. Yet, we must also confront the reality that alongside this progress, and perhaps in response to it, a troubling wave of backlash threatens women and girls' rights worldwide, including challenges to the very concept of gender as the social and cultural norms and power relations we have built around sex. We see retrogressive narratives and policies designed to restrict rights and divide movements for dignity and equality. These are not abstract debates. They are concrete harms with grave costs for women and girls. In our most recent response, the working group, together with 30 independent mandate holders, issued a joint statement reaffirming the centrality of gender to the protection of human rights. Today, I urge states to act with determination to preserve international consensus and protect hard-won gains for women and girls. At the same time, we also recognize that these moments of challenge can be moments of opportunity. The working group remains committed to supporting states and stakeholders in advancing substantive gender equality as articulated in CEDAW. This year, through its forthcoming report on artificial intelligence and through the CREATE framework presented in its latest guidance, this framework offers a holistic and inclusive pathway to counter the gender backlash and to foster the transformation needed for a global community truly rooted in human dignity. Excellencies, while we celebrate the achievements of member states, civil society, the United Nations, all who are gathered here, we must also confront urgently and honestly what it will take to achieve gender equality. We can't afford another 30 years of effort only to see progress unravel. What is needed now is investment and political will to hold the line, the clarity to find ways forward amidst mounting challenges, and the integrity to trust women and girls as they continue to lead the way. Thank you.
I thank the chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. I now invite Ms. Reem Al-Salem, Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its causes and consequences, to make her statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action, the BDPA, gave the world a visionary blueprint that recognized the structural, societal, and individual causes of violence against women and their consequences. Today, as we commemorate its anniversary, we must recommit to its promise with honesty and courage. That starts with returning to the original intent of the BDPA, not diluted, not reinterpreted, and to implementing it comprehensively and not superficially. Let me highlight 6 commitments that are especially urgent and pertinent today. First, we must reaffirm women's inherent dignity and humanity. The BDPA mentions dignity 7 times and humanity 5 times, reminding us that women are not a subset, but are half of humanity. Yet today, those words have vanished from our policy language as though women's most basic worth and rights could be set aside. If we lose the language of dignity and humanity, we lose the foundation of equality. Second, we must reclaim the material reality of being female. The BDPA references the term sex or a derivative of it 176 times, recalling that all major human rights instruments prohibit discrimination on that basis. And yet, 3 decades later, the architects of the BDPA would be in disbelief to learn that stating this truth is branded by some as hateful, outdated, and regressive. Third, we must confront the rampant commodification and objectification of women and girls. Their bodies, their sexuality, and even reproductive functions have been turned into products for the sale and purchase, creating patriarchal entitlements and control, both online and offline. The BDPA was gravely and rightly concerned with this exploitation, particularly of prostitution and trafficking for sexual exploitation, and urged states to prosecute those who profit from it. Today, we must finally heed that call. Fourth, the BDPA identified aggression, colonialism, and foreign occupation as causes of grave violations, ethnic cleansing, genocide that fall within cruelty on women and girls. While governments stand idly by, women and girls, particularly in Palestine and in Afghanistan, are being intentionally and systematically targeted and destroyed. These atrocities and the impunity granted to their perpetrators expose the profound hypocrisy of governments who claim to defend women's rights while turning a blind eye to their annihilation. Fifth, the BDPA demanded accountability. But instead of an increased access to justice, we are seeing the opposite, on several fronts undermining rights hard won. Perpetrators of rape, trafficking, war crimes, and genocide walk free, flaunting their impunity while some governments boast of their support to them. And finally, the BDPA warned against excessive military spending, recognizing that militarization fuels violence against women while draining resources from peace, women empowerment, and ending violence, as well as social justice. Yet today, the global arms race intensifies, leaving women and girls to pay a hefty price. Excellencies, 30 years ago, states believed this agenda was achievable. If this was possible then, it is possible now, not as an act of charity, but as a necessity and undeniable right for women, for half of humanity. That half is watching, and that half will hold you to account. Thank you.
I thank the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its causes and consequences. I now invite Cecilia Suarez, UN Global Advocate for the Spotlight Initiative, to make her statement.
Good morning, Madam President, Secretary General, Excelencias, amigos. Nos reunimos como
Excellencies, friends, we meet this month as every year to take a look at the world that we live, a complex world without a doubt, among multiple armed conflicts, a full-scale genocide, and an increasingly severe climate crisis, and an unstoppable advance of technology without a clear legal framework or a transparent one. And as each September, we return to a topic that brings us together, the equality of that women and girls continue to demand throughout our planet. Today, with the radical urgency that shows that a policy of omission would mean for millions of women and girls in every part of the world a step backwards. It's not a surprise for anyone that global investment in gender equality is inadequate as a small part of global budgets. The numbers demonstrated. Just in 2025, the combat for gender equality shows a budgetary deficit of $420 billion. In contrast, the global investment in military expenditures is $2.7 trillion. $2.718 trillion that invested in war compared to over 400 billion deficit in gender equality. In other words, the world prefers to invest 6 times more in preparing for a conflict rather than investing in upholding and promoting the rights of half of the population. This is how the economies are built. So the obvious question is, what have we more normalized that turns out that promoting the means of war is more important than promoting the rights of women? How long we will continue to think that we will be allowed to live as second-class citizens? It might be a naive question. The war is a business, of course. But it's also important to invest in what is maintaining half of the world population far from achieving their full potential within our societies, and in turn restricting the growth of society as a whole. And we will repeat it again. This gap must be understood as something that oppresses and afflicts only women. But that is a mistake. Let's ask ourselves, what does a man truly lose when he is indoctrinated in the apparent privilege granted to him by his masculinity? What we see is that what is missing is doubt, fragility, truth, the ability to feel. I can also mention that 90% of organizations working in favor of women have seen very harsh budgetary cutbacks. The situation is critical. So I will be very concrete. What we need are resources, reforms, and leadership. The Spotlight Initiative has demonstrated with its mechanisms, programs, and legal frameworks that it is possible to obtain positive and concrete results in this fight. What is required is leadership from those who are gathered here. Leadership that fosters reforms and that with with facts makes it possible to truly invest in the fight for equality, with actions rather. And lastly, to those who are skeptical, I will ask, do you really believe that our passage, our presence in this world is truly worth investing in destruction instead of investing in efforts that make us all progress together? Thank you.
I thank Ms. Suarez, and now I invite Ms. Memorio Kanshamba, Executive Director of the African Women's Development and Communication Network, to make a statement.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, thank you for this opportunity to speak at this occasion. I stand before you not as a one voice, but many that carry the breath of African women and girls, from the mountains of Kilimanjaro to the shores of Dakar, the streets of Harare, and the villages of Mali. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration, lit a flame. Women and girls danced. We sang together. The moment was not only symbolic, it was sacred. It was a covenant. And yes, there has been progress in the areas that Your Excellencies eloquently discussed and share on care work, gender-responsive budgeting, on women, peace and security, on the girl child, and climate justice. But let us be honest, even though this has entered the discourse has not delivered. There's been persistent and deliberate gaps, particularly the chronic underfunding of national gender institutions and the many sectors that shape our lives: health, education, agriculture, livelihoods, as well as public service provision. We have seen the erosion of women's organizing and feminist movements. We have seen reversals of hard-won gains and rights undermining our demands and struggle. We African women and girls demand bold, transparent, and participatory accountability. We insist on inclusion of women and girls in all their diversity. Civil society is not the enemy of the state. We are co-creators of development. We are guardians of democracy. We are the architects of liberation. The backlash that we face is not just against gender equality. It's against the truth. It is against freedom. It's against the principles upon which these institutions celebrating 80 years has been founded. We must affirm feminist principles that offer real alternatives to the broken system. Ubuntu, our shared humanity and interdependence, reparative justice for colonialization, debt, and climate harm. Africa each year loses close to 60 billion through illicit financial flows. These are funds and resources that can make a huge impact on women's rights and gender equality. Your Excellency, we also face a lot on our peace as a continent, on the dignity, on the extraction that we see of critical resources in the name of advancing climate transition. We see systematic violence. 80 years of the United Nations, we must not still be debating the relevance of gender equality and women's rights. Not in this generation, not after 30 years of Beijing, not after decades of the struggle. Women and girls deserve a life free of violence, free from the misogyny, free from the technology-facilitated violence that we see. Women and girls deserve to live and to thrive in dignity and joy. UNGA 80 must rise to this moment of reckoning and make bold, unapologetic resolve to fund gender equality and women's rights. It is non-negotiable. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Kachamba. I now invite Ms. Nadia Murad, Nobel Peace Laureate and founder of Nadia's Initiative, to make her statement.
Thank you, Madam President, for your commitment to advancing the rights of women and girls globally. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 30 years ago in Beijing, the world declared that women's rights are human rights. Today, we gather not only to reflect on that promise, but to ask, are we truly fulfilling it? Progress has been made, more women in parliaments, in classrooms, in leadership. But we are also at a dangerous crossroads. Around the world, democracy is weakening, extremism is rising, and women's rights are under attack. Nowhere is this more visible than in conflict-affected and crisis-affected areas. Millions of women and girls denied the right to education, targeted with sexual violence, or forced into early marriage. Behind these injustices are human lives, mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends, families destroyed, futures stolen. I was once a young woman living in peace until ISIS captured me and countless other women and girls, shattering our lives in unimaginable ways. Hundreds of these women and girls, including my niece, my sister-in-law, and my cousins, are still missing in captivity in Syria. Since my escape, I have met many women who endured unimaginable suffering and whose strength is extraordinary. But strength alone cannot rebuild lives. They need action, they need justice, they need resources. And yet, women's organizations, the lifeline in times of crisis, remain underfunded and excluded. Perpetrators of sexual violence continue to enjoy impunity. Equally urgent, the international community must hold accountable regimes, groups, and governments that deny women and girls the rights, those that legalize child marriage, restrict education, or enact discriminatory laws. Justice must extend beyond individuals to the system and structures that perpetuate inequality. If we are serious about the Beijing Platform for Action, then we must do three things. Fund the women's organizations on the front lines, guarantee women's full participation in peace and security, hold perpetrators and oppressive systems accountable, because impunity should never be an option. These are not just policies, they are promises we owe it to every woman and girl. Sustainable peace is impossible while half of humanity's population is silenced or targeted with violence. 30 years after Beijing, reflection is not enough. We must accelerate. The next generation of women and girls deserve to inherit no more promises, but the reality of equality, justice, and dignity. Thank you.
I thank Nadia Murad, and with the wise words from her, we have just heard the last speaker for the opening segment of this high-level meeting. I thank all our eminent speakers once again for their participation and insightful interventions, and maybe we have applause for all of the speakers again. Heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, distinguished delegates, distinguished participants. We shall now hear statements in the plenary segment in accordance with paragraphs 1 and 3b of General Resolution 79/288. Before giving the floor to the first speaker, I would like to inform delegations that we have a very, very, very long list of inscriptions, which shows the commitments. But in order to enable the high-level meeting to hear from as many delegations as possible in the limited time, all speakers are requested to adhere to the 3-minute time limit for statements in the national capacity and 5 minutes for statements made on behalf of a group of states. Delegations are advised that the limit for time statement will be strictly enforced, and I would like to underline that. The microphones will be automatically muted once the speaking time has elapsed. Having said this, I would appeal to all speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to facilitate interpretation into the 6 official languages of the United Nations, and have always a look at the little clock in front of you. Having said that, it's my dear honor to give now the floor to our first speaker of the high-level meeting convened by the President of the General Assembly on the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women. And I give the floor to Her Excellency Jennifer Gerling Simons, President of the Republic of Suriname.
Excellencies, it is with great honor and responsibility that I stand here as the first female president of the Republic of Suriname and also the first member state speaking today as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women. This historic occurrence in my country has not only cracked the glass ceiling, but more importantly paved the way for particularly girls to dream about something that was perceived uncommon only about 3 decades ago. Today, we celebrate the work and advocacy of many pioneers at both political and intergovernmental levels in bringing the cause of women's empowerment and gender equality to the center of the global agenda. Madam President, as I pause to reflect of the role of women in Suriname, I can conclude that women of my country historically have always been on the forefront in the fight for freedom, justice, and economic development. Suriname remains committed to the Beijing Declaration and has made gradual progress in strengthening legislation, advancing gender-sensitive policies, and implementing programs to address persistent inequalities. Persistent challenges such as economic disparities, gender-based violence, and underrepresentation of women in leadership. These must be addressed with renewed urgency and vigor. We also face new and have to address new challenges, like the negative influence of social media on the self-image of many girls and young women. In closing, Madam President, Suriname reaffirms its unwavering commitment to advancing the rights, empowerment, and full participation of women and girls in every aspect of life. As a priority action, my government commits to further improve access to STEM education for girls and the protection of women and girls against gender-based violence. Advancing gender equality means progress in achieving sustainable development for all. Working as equals, living as equals, as women and men, we are better together. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, and again, congratulations for being the first of your kind, the first female president of Suriname. Congratulations. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Karen Keller-Sutter, President of the Swiss Confederation.
Madame
President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action remains our collective compass to achieve gender equality because gender equality is not an option. It is a universal human right and a catalyst for economic development. Despite the progress made, we still face serious challenges, including in Switzerland. First and foremost, violence against women remains an unacceptable reality. The wage gap persists, largely because working mothers are not fully integrated into the labor market and because women are still underrepresented in leadership roles. 30 years after Beijing, our goals remain unchanged. Switzerland has taken concrete steps to implement the rights enshrined in our Constitution and in our international commitments. Our national strategy for gender equality, adopted in 2021, as well as major legislative reforms, have improved the protection of victims of gender-based violence, including expanding the legal definition of rape and criminalizing stalking. And this November, we will be launching a nationwide campaign against gender-based violence with a clear message that equality protects against violence. In our foreign policy, Switzerland is deeply committed to promoting universality of women's rights and gender equality, with a particular focus on women's economic and political participation and the fight against gender-based violence. Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, recent crises have set back the cause of gender equality. The progress we have achieved over the past few decades are now at risk in too many countries, but solutions have been formulated a long time ago, and they've been set out in various multilateral frameworks. Today, we need to build on that foundation and commit to putting it into practice. This is the surest path to protecting people and building societies that are truly equal and inclusive. Democracy and economic prosperity depend on it. Together, let us make the vision of Beijing a reality. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. I give the floor now to Her Excellency Netumbo Nandi Naitwa, President of the Republic of Namibia.
Madam President, gender equality and women empowerment have been key priorities for Namibia's government since our independence in 1990. We have shown strong political will through adopting international commitments, including the Beijing Declaration and the Platform of Action, which are domesticated in our national gender policy. 30 years ago in Beijing, we affirmed that women's rights were indeed human rights. Since then, Namibia has always built on the strong foundation of this declaration to draw a strong link on issues related to women and development access. Our progress in the area of political inclusion and legal frame are grounded in this and underpinned our deep commitment to achieve progress for empowerment of women. As a result of this, Namibia closed 81.1% of its gender gap, ranking 8th globally and first in Africa as per the 2025 World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap reports. As President, I'm happy to highlight our historical milestone. Namibia now has a female president, vice president, Speaker of the National Assembly, and Secretary General of the SWAPO Party, the ruling party in Namibia. And women hold 57% of the cabinet, including key ministries such as finance, health, education, international relations, and trade. Madam President, as we reflect on our progress, we are also aware that our work is far from to be done. There are areas where there is room for improvement, particularly in the area of economics. In our national context, this is mainly in the area of economic inclusion of women, in many economic activities such as mining, fishery, oil and gas, particularly rural women who still remain in the margin of the economic activities. Economic challenge persists across the many sectors, so much that we have to do a lot, particularly in the informal sector, to bring women to the par.
Madam President, thank you. I thank you very much, Madam President. And also congratulations to Namibia. And just in case you hear again, we couldn't find a woman, call the government or the president of Namibia. They could advise you. So the next on the list, I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Dina Ercilia Boluarte Segarra, President of the Republic of Peru.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam President. 30 years have passed since we adopted the Declaration and Platform of Action of Beijing, a historic landmark that marked the most significant political commitment to achieve the empowerment of all women, adolescents and girls, and the full exercise of their human rights under conditions of equality. Since then, we have achieved some significant results. We have reduced the gap in access to education and the labour market. A growing number of women is getting access to decision-making fora, and we have strengthened norms in fighting violence and discrimination against women. Nevertheless, President, there are still structural gaps that are limiting the development of women and girls. Extreme poverty and multidimensional poverty, discrimination and violence continue to disproportionately affect us as women. And Peru is taking decisive action. In 2019, we approved our national gender equality policy. Its key objectives are to guarantee women the exercise of all of their rights, the eradication of violence against women, the empowerment of women so that we can overcome the institutional and socio-cultural barriers that women face. We have more than 400 emergency women's centres across the country, and they have an intercultural approach to deal with cases of violence against women so that we can put an end to this scourge. And we are using public funds to finance projects to support the economic independence of women. We have also taken steps to legally recognise the right to care and to create a national care system to guarantee this right. We're also accrediting and certifying the skills of care workers, many of whom are women. We are working to guarantee women's access to quality education and also working to promote greater inclusion in the labour market and increasing women's participation at the political level and all levels of government. And I'm very proud to let you know that in 2023 we abolished child marriage. Madam President, as the first woman president, the interpreter apologises, the microphone does not appear to be working.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Madam President. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias and
thank you very much.
Congratulations for being the first female president, and may I remind all speakers and maybe also all delegation to look at the script again. I'm very sorry for that one, but we have so many presidents and prime ministers speaking in a row. The next I may introduce is Her Excellency Nataša Pirc-Musar, President of the Republic of Slovenia.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, we need to face a difficult truth. Progress on gender equity has been uneven, and many of our hard-won gains are now at risk. Sexual and gender-based violence, economic inequality, a lack of sexual and reproductive rights, political underrepresentation, and the systemic discrimination of women persist. Real change requires making gender equity a genuine priority, including in peace and security. If not now, when? At a time when the world is facing a record number of conflicts. Conflicts that claim a devastating number of civilian lives, as in Gaza, where 2/3 of the victims are women and children. Simply put, the inclusion of women is a guarantee for peace. It is also high time that the UN's leadership reflects the diversity of the people it serves. This calls for bold action from all of us to nominate, support, and elect women to the highest offices, both here at the UN and in our own countries as well. After 80 years, the United Nations must lead by example. We cannot afford to miss yet another chance to appoint the first woman Secretary General, nor we can afford to move forward into a future where still only 6% of General Assembly presidents are women. Let me be clear. The issue has never been about merit. There are plenty smart and capable women. What is lacking is the will to open doors. Dear all, let us invest in women's leadership and ensure that every girl can live a life of opportunity. I know that women and girls in Afghanistan, Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Haiti, and beyond are counting on us. And let me just conclude. My husband is a proud feminist. I am a proud feminist. And I am battling this battle not to say that the men need less. I'm not doing this for that. I just want the girls to have the same opportunities. And we need men to help us And just to conclude with a couple of numbers, do you know how many presidents we have, female presidents we have in European Union? 2, in Malta and in Slovenia. Do you know how many presidents we have here in United Nations out of 193 members? 16. Those are the numbers. Thank you. And
I thank Her Excellency, Madam President, and again also congratulations to you being the first in that role. I give the floor now to His Excellency Daniel Francesco Chapo, President of the Republic of Mozambique.
Signora Presidente.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, before my intervention, I would like to say that I am here in order to save the honor of men in the room, because since we've started, I just see women making the intervention. For that reason, I would like to say that we need to have men talking about this topic too. It's an honor to address this distinguished assembly. In a year, we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action. On this occasion, I would like to reaffirm the unwavering commitment to the women empowerment of Mozambique. This is why the implementation of the agenda of Beijing, we have defined 2 priority areas for all girls and women, namely freedom of poverty through promoting access to reproductive resources and economic resources, zero violence, with a particular focus on eradication of femicide and all forms of gender-based violence. Your Excellencies, since Beijing, we have achieved gender parity in the Council of Ministers and in the Parliament. Almost 50% of the girls in the country are enrolled in all the levels of education. We have increased the number of institutional births from 48% to 65%. We have women in leadership position in the central organ of sovereignty, like the Prime Minister, the President of the Assembly of the Republic, the President of Constitutional Council, President of Administrative Courts, amongst other significant advances achieved in the local leadership. We have also created around 30 integrated centers to fight gender-based violence. We still face a lot of challenges. 44% of the girls are in early unions, 68% were victims of violence, and 27% of girls are still unemployed. Mindful of new frontiers of inequalities that are emerging with artificial intelligence and digital technologies that affect disproportionately the employment of women, Mozambique is integrating into the curriculum and promoting girls' access to science and technology,
Thank you, Mr. President. Obrigado, and I thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Mozambique. I give the floor now to Her Excellency Hilda Hein, President of the Republic of Marshall Islands.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Yahweh. 30 years ago, Ambassador Nay John Edwards, now happily retired, led a delegation of Marshallese women to the Beijing Conference of Women. That conference changed her life and generations of Marshallese women ever since. Since the Beijing Declaration, gender is now a core pillar of our national planning. As a small island developing state, we are not moving fast enough with island-tailored strategies. In a nation where 1 out of 2 women experience violence, and in a Pacific Island region with the lowest rate of women in elected government in the world. Core efforts need to be strengthened, including in our families and communities. We can build on our traditional matrilineal customs to encourage the role of women as peace builders, as human rights defenders, and contemporary leaders in their fields. While the Marshall Islands has instituted important legal reforms, rates of gender-based violence remain unacceptably high. Education, police officer training, and crisis services have been key steps. We will continue to ensure the full recognition and realization of human rights for women and girls, including through our recent ratification of the Palermo Protocol on Trafficking. The health of women and girls is a key priority and is written in our survival story, where the nuclear legacy has left behind cancers, reproductive health struggles, and the unseen weight of caregiving. We answer this with urgency, expanding maternal care and family planning, and launching mass cervical cancer screening and prevention so that every woman and girls has the chance to live and to lead. Women's economic empowerment is vital to achieving equality. Through the Marshall Islands CAREF Fund, a national financing initiative that supports women's entrepreneurship and access to capital, we are opening pathways to women to drive innovation, recognizing when women prosper, nation prosper. Our national early childhood development framework has forged key progress in direct interventions to provide assistance, nutrition, and care for vulnerable communities, including expectant mothers and mothers of young children. This will be expanded for universal coverage to address crisis levels of malnutrition and stunting. We welcome the region's new policy launch to incorporate climate and resilience in the framework. Madam
I thank you, Madam President. I now have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Gordana Siljanovska-Davkova, President of the Republic of North Macedonia.
Distinguished Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 30 years ago, in Beijing, the nations of the world made a solemn pledge to advance women's rights and human rights, to achieve gender equality, and to empower every woman and girl to live free from violence, discrimination, and limitation. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action remain a cornerstone of international law, a living testament that equality for women is both justice and a prerequisite for peace, prosperity, and sustainable development. And yet, 3 decades on, we must admit progress has been uneven, fragile, and too often reversible. Violence against women persists with impunity, femicide desecrates the sanctity of life, and structural barriers still deny women leadership, resources, and decision-making power. These are not abstractions. They would wound families, societies, and generations. At the same time, the very institution created to safeguard peace, the United Nations faces a profound crisis. Conceived as the greatest peace project of humankind, It is now stands against a backdrop of wars raging across continents. 80 years after its founding, peace, the raison d'etre of the UN, remain elusive. Mars still rules when it is time for Venus, embodied in the vision, compassion, and leadership of women to guide our common future. If we are serious about peace, then the time has come to entrust the helm of the United Nations to a woman. We, the women of the world, together with the children, are the first and greatest victims of war. But we are also the bearers of healing, compassion, and hope. Gender equality is not a feminist privilege. It is a humanist imperative. We do not ask for favors, not for matriarchy, but for a just order in which the talents and creativity of half of humanity are fully recognized for the advancement of politics, science, health, education, and peace. Excellencies, the Beijing Declaration called on us to ensure equal rights and equal access for women and men, girls and boys. That call remains urgent today. Only together, women and men, do we embody the full renew our commitment.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you. I thank you, Madam President. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Berjam Begay, President of the Republic of Albania.
Madam President, Excellencies, it's my pleasure to present at the commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Conference an important platform in the global efforts for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Today serves as an opportunity to renew our collective commitment and to give fresh impetus to the full implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. We have made significant strides in ensuring women's participation in political, economic, and social life. Yet, with only 5 years left to achieve SDGs, progress on gender equality is stagnating and in some areas is regressing. We must reverse this trend. This meeting must serve as a turning point, moving beyond rhetoric to action. We must mobilize adequate financial resources, reinforce accountability frameworks, and invest in measurable and transformative actions. Albania is ready to share its experience. Over the past decade, we have undertaken substantial legal, institutional, and societal reforms aimed at promoting gender equality. Albania has closed the gender gap in education, strengthened women's economic participation, and invested in digital inclusion and entrepreneurship for women and girls. These reforms have been shaped in consultation with civil society and the youth, making gender equality an important aspect of our society. To us, gender equality is essential to sustainable development, social cohesion, and shared prosperity. Albania has pledged two priorities under the Beijing Plus 30 Action Agenda. First, to intensify efforts to eliminate violence against women, and second, to expand the application of gender-responsible budgeting. At a time when conflicts and crises are multiplying, the world needs the leadership and contribution of women more than ever. Their role is fundamental in building peace, preventing conflict, and creating more inclusive and resilient societies. Albania reaffirmed its full commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, to the 2030 Agenda, and to international human rights instruments. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency President of the Republic of Albania. I have the honor to give the floor to His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in all of your capacities. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action set out an ambitious roadmap to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Today, as we mark this anniversary, we need to demonstrate clear-sightedness, determination, and a renewed commitment. Despite significant progress that has been achieved over recent decades, we see today alarming setbacks in women's rights. There are armed conflicts, the climate crises, and regressive movements which imperil our basic rights. Security Council Resolution 1325 was adopted 25 years ago. It is a key landmark. When women participate in peace processes and are present at the negotiating table, the agreements that are the fruit of these negotiations are more inclusive, and peace is more likely to be attained and to be lasting. As part of our commitment to human rights and the dignity of every person, Monaco has always supported international efforts for advancing gender equality. Both on our soil and through international cooperation, the Principality has been working proactively to promote girls' access to education, women's economic empowerment and independence, as well as the fight against all forms of violence, including in conflict and crisis contexts. The Madagascar Committee for the Protection and Promotion of Women's Rights was established in 2018. Today, this is the cornerstone for mobilization and awareness at the national level. The government of our Principality is working closely with UN agencies such as UN Women and its Sport for Generation Equality framework, which recognizes the role of sports as key leverage towards social transformation. Monaco is proud of supporting this initiative. We believe that sports should be an engine for empowerment, for respect, and for solidarity. UNICEF and UNFPA are also key partners for our action through tangible projects. So these partnerships help to anchor the principles of the Beijing Declaration in actions on the ground. I also wish to highlight the key role of civil society, women leaders, young people, and male allies in building a world that is more just, with greater solidarity and greater equality. Our Principality reaffirms a commitment to continue along this path in a decisive way alongside all of those who work day by day to ensure that this equality becomes a reality. Thank you.
I thank His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco, Sovereign Prince of the Principality of Monaco. And I have the honor now to give the floor to His Excellency Assali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros.
Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée.
Madam President of the General Assembly, honourable guests, ladies and gentlemen, Salam alaikum. It is a great honour and a real pleasure for me to take the floor on this solemn occasion of the 30th anniversary of the World Conference on Women. This anniversary is a time for us to take stock of the progress that has been made since the historic Beijing Conference in 1995, but also to highlight the achievements and best practices as well as the continuing challenges when it comes to promoting gender equality around the world. As we are faithful to our international and regional commitments, the Comoros has ratified a number of legal instruments that are relevant to the promotion and protection of women's rights, notably the prevention of all forms of discrimination against women. During the presidency of the Comoros of the African Union, we were proud to hold up the torch of this important cause, and on the 30th of October 2023, our country organized the third conference of consultation of women African leaders on the topic stimulating commitment towards the economic empowerment of women and putting an end to violence against women and girls. Nationally, we have always guaranteed women's rights by protecting them against violence, exploitation, and any form of violence. We have adopted a number of legislative instruments nationally, including the new penal code that makes provisions for the protection of women and children. And more recently, in 2024, we created a ministry dedicated to the promotion of gender equality and training, and there is a woman heading that up. We have also established a national policy for gender equality, and we have developed mechanisms for medical, legal, and other support for victims of gender-based violence. And we also offer special support for women and girls who have been victims. The network of women African leaders is actively involved with local authorities. I have placed the promotion of women at the heart of our priorities, and today women hold positions of responsibility both within the government, the parliament, legal and judicial institutions, and other areas. The interpreter apologizes, the speaker's microphone has been cut off.
Excellency, Excellency, kindly conclude your statement. I thank His Excellency, the President of the Union of Comoros, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye, President of the Republic of Senegal.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President and General Assembly, members of the General Assembly, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank the President of the General Assembly and the Secretariat and the Secretary General for the invitation extended to participate in this meeting. We wish to recall the following. Pursuant to a call for action and mobilization for resources in order to accelerate progress towards full gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. The Beijing Program of Action has been a turning point when it comes to awareness about the obligation to have greater justice vis-a-vis all women. Progress has been achieved. However, this progress should be assessed on a regular basis in order to identify weaknesses, as well as to make the necessary adjustments to build a fair and more inclusive society. The commitment to promotion of gender equality and the rights of women means that there is a need to fight against poverty, to guarantee women's access to economic resources, to education, to health care, as well as to enhance women's participation in decision-making bodies, as well as to protect them against all forms of violence and discrimination. This is what we have been doing in Senegal through our public policies and through the Senegal 2050 vision, which places women and young people at the very heart of national citizenship and stability. We have been implementing a progress accelerator to surmount the persistent obstacles to equality with programs which include expanding access for women and girls to education and training, and combating unstintingly all gender-based violence. We are fighting against all forms of violence and discrimination against women and girls, and this struggle needs to be continued with vigor in neither in religion, history, or any affiliation, or any argument can be made for women to be abused, discriminated against, or marginalized. All public bodies, members of civil society, religious and faith traditional leaders, all citizens have an obligation, more than ever before, to mobilize ourselves against brutality, against harassment, against rape, and against all forms of abuse. Together, let us surmount the persistent inequality. Let us work towards a greater partnership among states. Let us prepare future generations, succeeding generations, helping them to live in a fairer, more equal, and more harmonious world. This is a shared responsibility. This is a universal moral duty. I thank you for your attention.
I thank His Excellency the President of Senegal, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadéra, President of the Central African